are you?
Good. Great to meet you. So let me just make sure I'm going to say your name correctly. So we'll pronounce it for me so I'm saying it correctly.
Sheila McCormack.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome. So we're going live on YouTube. I think, we are on live on YouTube. And welcome to the RoundTable. This is, we're Black Lives Now. We're a new organization that was created in the fallout from George Floyd. And so we've been sitting down and talking to candidates running for office at various levels. And we wanted to give you a time to introduce yourselves to our members and before they go vote. So I'm Sienna Thompson with my co-host Sean Alexis, and this is the RoundTable. So thank you for joining us today, Sheila.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, we got some time set up. Tell us about yourself and who you're running against, your campaign, all of that.
Okay. As you mentioned earlier, my name is Sheila McCormack. I'm running for Congress, United States House of Representatives for Florida's District 20, which encompasses Broward and Palm Beach County. I'm a mom, wife, lawyer, and healthcare executive. What actually thrusted me into even running is, I had some personal experiences where I saw personally the healthcare disparities we have in our community. During my last year of law school, my daughter got diagnosed with a learning disability. And I was trying to figure out what to do, how to get resources. I felt like it was me and the teachers at that time who were really trying to figure out what was going on. I was a single mom for 12 years. And so it was really frustrating. And the more I started speaking to more women in the community and more moms, they were telling me how their kids were being diagnosed also. And when I looked further, I saw that there was a disproportionate number of Black and brown children who were being diagnosed with learning disabilities, all types of things, with no real resources because our kids were so-called not, sick enough, or, they weren't severe enough for SSI. And so it kind of put us in this gray area where they had no resources. And so I started advocating on that issue. My background is I went to Howard University for undergrad, University of Maryland to pursue my master's in business administration, and St. Thomas Law School. So when I graduated law school, it took me a long time to get through that because I was a single parent. But once I graduated, I got into healthcare regulations, and I started lobbying with different groups about what was going on with the Affordable Health Care Act. And then one day I just brought up the issue like, hey, we're suffering. Our community, our children need resources. And it was kind of brushed under the table, I was told that, well, we can't help schools. That's the state issue. But really what it was coming down to was disproportionate access to healthcare. It was coming to people not taking our kids and our issues seriously. And I even saw it, as I was leading a healthcare company, it was economic also, right? Our businesses, finances, where, we wouldn't get the contracts, we were always subcontractors. And when I started looking deeper, I asked that question, why is it that in a district that's over 60% minorities, their federal funding, the federal contracts, the state contracts are not going to even 10% of minorities, Black minorities. And so I just started seeing the inequality pretty much being, it's rampant throughout every industry: social justice, economic justice, healthcare. And this is really where we are right now. And I started talking to the people, letting them know that this is what our generation's work is to do, is to end all of that systematic racism, targeting, inequality. That's what we have to do. We're being called at this time to do our generation's work, which is to finally get economic inclusion and any kind of bigotry, any kind of sidelining or pay inequality. And that's how I got here.
Wow, fantastic story. And tell us a little bit about your district. Where is it at, and who currently represents it?
So currently the congressman is Congressman Alcee Hastings. He's been there for 27 years. And the district is encompassing Broward and Palm Beach County. The way that it's actually cut up, if you're in a predominantly minority area, you're in my district. And it's very weird because we're not neighbors to some places either. It's just really sectioned off by the percentage of minorities. So what makes us fascinating is that, we have a large portion, which is more metropolitan. And then we have, a huge portion, which is Belgrade, where they have sugar farms and people are living more of an agrarian lifestyle. And so if you look at being similarly situated and advocating, we're not. We're not similarly situated. And so we have a big portion full of Black and brown workers who have been left with nothing. If you see the conditions, how much they're getting paid, even the pollutants they're being subject to because of the sugarcane and the sugar farmers' practices. It looks like they're back in the 60s when you go over there. The schools, most of the kids have asthma because of the air, the pollutants. They're just allowed to do anything they want. And on this side, we have no clue. You know, the part of the community that has more money has no clue that we're even in the same district. So that's where it becomes something, we have to be more unified when we're talking about our experience and what we're fighting for. The present congressman has been there for 27 years. Within that time, he's passed only 7 bills. 4 of them were naming post offices, and he hasn't passed a bill in the last 10 years. And so it's just that time. And if we ask, why are we still here? These are the reasons, right? We have to take a close look of what effectiveness really means. A lot of the times people try and tell us to assume effectiveness based on seniority, but that's not where we are right now. We see that right now in Congress, a lot of the freshman members who are in are actually moving forward initiatives and issues with equality more than the ones who've been there longer. We also see that the bills they're putting up now are having co-sponsors of people who've been there longer. Whereas like in my district, we have a 27-year incumbent who has, most of his bills have no co-sponsors, not even freshman members. So freshman members, junior members aren't even signing on to any of your bills. It's a testament to what's going on. There's no good ideas being put out that people will sign on. And we see the freshman members who have good ideas, they are now signing on to that and pushing it forward.
Wow. So in your community, education, is that an issue that you see, like as far as like fundamental education in the Black community where you're at?
Yes, education is a huge issue, but we also, I mean, right now with COVID, you know, our district is the second time that we're a hotspot. And, you know, we're all, at this point, we all know that the comorbidity factors, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, all those comorbidities that we live with and never know, because historically we haven't had access to jobs that give us health insurance. So now when you couple that with COVID, the death rate is us, it's our community. You know, and we have to understand and be very clear, because some people try and say, oh, if we didn't eat this way, it's not just if we didn't eat this way, but historically in our neighborhoods, where our doctors, Medicaid is extremely hard to even access reimbursement. So we see a lot of these layering of issues that the pandemic actually just made it easier for us to see what we've been suffering for months.
So, Ms. McCormack, you talked about health issues, which is directly tied into wage and, you know, sustainable wage as far as how much they're paid an hour. If you're underpaid and you can't afford your bills, you're not going to be buying vegetables and nice food. You're going to buy what you can afford, which may be anything, you know, like ramen noodles or something, if that's all you can afford. So do you support raising the minimum wage in Broward County to, say, for example, $15 an hour, or is that on your radar?
Yes, I support $15 an hour. And, you know, some pushback that I got from some people who are business owners, they said to me, well, how are Black businesses going to be able to afford that? And I was like, well, it has to be comprehensive, right? Because the real issues on why Black businesses cannot afford it is because we are not paid the same. When we try and get contracts, you know, there's heavy negotiations and we're not getting those contracts. But when we start looking at it as a cumulative issue and have cumulative solutions and really stand firm on ending pay inequality, you'll start seeing that our businesses can afford to pay people $15 an hour. So I do believe that they come hand in hand. When we're talking about economic inclusion, we must include the $15 per hour within that, so we can all be able to thrive.
Absolutely. You know, that's what they call slave wage when you get paid like $8 an hour. At least that's what the Black people call it. I know I do.
Yeah. And it's the same argument too, right? Because like at the first time someone said that to me, I'm like, well, that's what they said during slavery, right? Well, we can't free them because how are we going to pay them? We can't fall prey to these kinds of ideas. The truth is, if we had economic equality from the beginning, when it came to pay, when it came to contracts, we can afford it. So we have to stand as a community and demand what is finally ours, get paid the same, and pay inequality, and pay us a living wage.
What's is housing an issue in the community? I'm sure with millions of people losing their jobs. What's that like there?
Housing is a huge issue, especially in some of our areas. There was a report and it actually said the areas that were in most danger, especially with the pandemic, were Miramar and Pompano, which are some of the largest areas in our district. So we're finding that before even the pandemic, housing was an issue because it was so expensive. Now with the pandemic, we have people who haven't been able to pay rent in so long. And so I got this question before where someone asked me, what should we do? And I said, we have to bail out the people. There must be some kind of housing stipend at this time right now. Some people are talking about bailing out everybody else, except for the people who are about to be homeless during a pandemic. You know, we have to start taking these kind of things seriously and making sure that we're safe. And right now, we don't have that voice fighting for that right now in our district.
And
In the world, like, what's police brutality like? I'm sure there are massive stories you could tell.
Yeah, we have an issue with police brutality. And, you know, for some people, they feel like, oh, it's not real. Because, you know, we're fortunate to have some areas that have a good amount of African-American police officers and they're more vigilant. But then you have neighboring areas where we're still being targeted. You know, we're still being, if you're driving down the street with a nice car, they're going to pull you over. You know, we're still being systematically targeted. And that's where I'm proposing that we just go ahead and audit every single police department, law enforcement agency, and it be from a third party that's not connected. And I tell everybody, when I say that, some people are like, oh, that's impossible. I said, no, it's not. I've been in healthcare for more than 20 years. And I could tell you in healthcare, if you're accused of, the whole industry at one point was accused of fraud and abuse. And when it was accused of fraud and abuse, they started having audits. So now there's a third party body that comes in and audits all these healthcare agencies. You don't know when they're coming. They come in, they run your books to see how many reports you have going on. And if you were found to have a flaw, then you are fined. Or if you don't get fined, you have to pay back some money. So if we do that for healthcare, why can't we do that with these police departments? We know that there's a historic systematic targeting of Black and brown. So if we are aware of that, so let's just do what we usually do. Why are we being shy now? Why is this not an option? And we have to start putting our foot down and demanding that, because if this isn't fraud and abuse, the way that they cover up these police brutalities, the way that they're abusing us, I mean, this is fraud and abuse. So let's do what we usually do and get it done now. The conversation of Black lives, white lives, of course, Black lives matter. All lives, let's put that aside. Come on, we know the truth. The truth is that we have been targeted. And in that sense, let's just do what needs to be done.
Well, how would you get around the police union? That seems to be the greatest, deterrent to any type of change. I mean, we've spoken to the Broward County Sheriff. He's on board with having an independent review board from the citizens. So what are your suggestions on that?
I think we have to talk to the union because, I've actually spoken to the union, and I think that the union is at a place where they kind of understand that this can't go forward. I think the people's movement, this election, is going to be very clear that this is not happening anymore. And the time is pretty much up. And the conversation I had with them was very candid. I have my brothers are actually police officers, and they have even told me, they said, being a Black man in the force is difficult because when you see any kind of disturbance or any kind of force that's unnecessary and you try to report it, they even look at you like you're afraid of retaliation. Your pension might be threatened. Your job is threatened. So even feeling safe as a member is an issue. And that's what we have to start looking at this, that it's not an issue of police versus people. It's an issue of being Black in America. And so that's the conversation we just need to be very honest about. And even the police officers who I know, like my brothers and them, they say the same thing, that within the force, there's starting to be conversations and division. And I think they want it resolved as quickly as we want it resolved. It just so happens that this is a time for us to apply pressure. We can't be shy about it. We have to have elected officials who are ready to apply pressure, and let's get this changed.
Absolutely.
Fund police. What are your thoughts on reallocating funds of the police or cutting their budget or reworking it in some way?
It has to be done. It has to be done. And the reason why it has to be done, because that has proven to be the most effective way of getting people to change their behavior, and not getting people to change their behavior because of like on the micro level, but because now the whole organization, which is concerned about budgeting, is now enforcing these new practices. And that's where the audit comes in, right? Because once you start having an audit, you have best practices that you're comparing them to. And you need that supervision internally where they're like, oh, I don't want my funds cut, so I'm going to do this. But there's another portion of it that we have to be honest with ourselves as a country and as a community. Police officers are always in the front line running into trauma. When you're running into trauma like that, you need to have the mental health resources to actually help deal with that. And they're not even being offered that. But then on the other side, the people who they're policing, all Americans, we don't really have any kind of real mental health initiatives out there either. So when we talk about now, even outside of what happens with the audit, we have to serve the community and put the resources in there, put the money in there to start expanding mental health. And the reason why it has to be community-based is because mental health, a lot of it is subjective. You know, when you're giving those answers, whoever's there is coming from their cultural perspective and they're putting that into their diagnosis. And we have to understand that it's not just like you take a blood test and it comes up, you know, with these numbers. It's really someone looking at you and they are putting some part of their culture on you and judging you. For that reason by itself, we have to put money. If your area has a good number of minorities, the therapists who are there need to come from it. They need to be empowered to start treating them so we can have finally fairness. And that even takes us back to why our children are being diagnosed so much with these disabilities. You know, they have people who've never dealt with Black children, don't understand Black culture. They come in, they test them, and they're like, "Oh, you're hyperactive." You know.
Before we move on, Miss McCormack, before we move on, I wanted to talk about what you were saying because you mentioned about you know, the police and how it's difficult for a Black man as a police officer. But the machine, the racism is more of a machine at this point. It's not so much like it used to be, where it was just straight individuals beating up black people and killing Black people. It's kind of like the laws in place allow racism to be enforced by police officers. So it doesn't really matter if they're Black, white, or Spanish. They can discriminate because things like qualified immunity give them protection. And it's like, you know, because you can do it, you will do it. It's human nature. What are you going to do to get laws, you know, passed, or how do you plan on getting laws passed when there's a huge Republican opposition in the state of Florida when it comes to like House of Representatives and stuff like that?
Well, the state of Florida, I'm running for United States House of Representatives. And on the federal level, I think everybody has come to the place where they have acknowledged the need for us to have new rules and new laws in place, especially when it comes to qualified immunity. We have seen that and acknowledged that this is pretty much the loophole where they're allowed to do whatever they want, especially when it comes to our community. So as I said, moving forward, what we have to do when it comes to the systematic nature of it, right? Because what I'm seeing is that it's not just the police officers, but also there are some people who are, sorry, I just got a message. The state attorney's office is also implicit in it, you know, the covering up of it. And so that's what we have to take a look at everyone who's playing a part in it when we're investigating them. And as far as the laws, we can apply pressure right now on the federal level to try and sway those Republicans who may be against it. But I think we have to really show them that this is not an issue of politics, which now this issue has become more and more politicized about if you're Republican, you're here, and if you're Democrat, you're here, or liberal. We have to bring them back to the human nature of it, and that this is what the people are actually demanding. Not even the politicians, but the people of all different backgrounds now are asking for protections, equal protections to everyone.
So you think you're going to demand support or like ask for support from Republicans? You can get that, you know, across the aisle support?
Definitely. I think definitely we can do it now, especially when we're facing an election. The more and more the numbers come out, the more and more that, you know, even because this outside of the president, the Republicans are concerned about keeping their seats even in the Senate. They're concerned about keeping their seats in the House. They're concerned about keeping any kind of power. So we see that this is the best negotiating moment right now, because everyone's looking at how do we maintain power? And a lot of people are being unseated with a whole bunch of newcomers, and that's translating. You know, the parties are looking. And so if the Republican Party is not willing to have the conversation, which I believe they are going to be more willing to, especially once we're able to get Joe Biden elected, that we'll have more talking and more ability to work across the aisles when it comes to that.
And we're when it comes to the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party, it seems like you lean more towards progressive ideas based on what you're saying. How would you navigate around that, given what Joe Biden has said about Medicaid for all, and Kamala Harris and her backing away from it?
Well, I think that they haven't been given the present facts. I was there when they were putting forth the facts for Medicaid for all, and people were like, well, how can we pay for it? During that time, even, I felt like they really were not pushing forward how much it would cost using telemedicine. They really didn't have understanding of telemedicine and healthcare, and there was more people who wanted to invalidate Medicare for all than explore all the options. What COVID actually did, COVID kind of transferred all the medical institutions or most agencies to telemedicine anyhow. They even put money into pushing telemedicine. So where we are right now, having Medicaid for all, starting off with a portal in the hotspots, which is a piece of legislation that I've been pushing and trying to get enacted, is for us to open up Medicaid for all, but we could start with the hotspots, start with telemedicine. What that allows us to do is that people could start, if you live in a hotspot like we do, you can actually call in and do a face-to-face, over the internet, talk to a doctor. They can even order blood work for you. You can get your blood work, see if you have any comorbidity, and that would be starting the transition. That is significantly cheaper than the numbers that were being reported when they first looked at Medicare for all. So I sincerely believe that now that we have a pandemic, now that we have the healthcare spectrum has changed so much, we're delivering care at a cheaper price, that the new facts will lean themselves closer towards this is something that we should definitely do.
Excellent. Anything, Sean?
One last thing. The last question is to set a realistic expectation for the Black community and for people that want change for police brutality. You get elected. January of next year starts off. How soon do you think you can make significant change, or there will be significant change in Florida as far as laws go in favor of ending police brutality? How soon?
I think it's going to be the agenda. Coming in, I know that the party actually sets an agenda, right? And we can influence what's going to be the actual agenda for the political agenda going forward. I definitely believe it's going to be on there, but I think it's going to be competing with, if you're talking about social justice and healthcare, I think social justice honestly is going to be competing with healthcare just because of the pandemic and our inability to contain the pandemic. But I think that is definitely going to be something that is either going to be attached to healthcare somehow or soon after that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that getting killed by police officers is a healthcare issue. I mean,
yes.
But thank you for the answer, though. I appreciate it.
Especially with Medicare. And that's what I keep, mental health. And that's why I keep weaving it in, because everybody talks about healthcare and they try to make it seem as if it's just going to the doctor, it's Medicare for all, not understanding how mental health initiatives coming in actually will start alleviating that and pushing the funding into the community with all of our professionals. We have so many healthcare professionals, therapists, who really just don't get the business that they need, the money they need to serve us.
Wonderful. Well, you got 30 seconds. Tell us, where we can find you and any last words you have.
Well, thank you so much for having me. If anybody would like to speak to me, you can reach me on my cell phone. It's 954-668-5358. I actually love speaking to the people more than anything. And we're actually in the middle of early voting. So I'm out here at the polls every single day. You can see me. And you can reach me on my website also, which is SheilaForCongress.com, SHEILA. forcongress.com. And once again, I thank you for allowing me to speak to everyone. And I just want to remind everyone that this is our destiny moment. Let's not let it go past us. We must complete the work that was started before us. When Martin Luther King passed, he passed on fighting for economic justice. Right now, we're facing economic inequality. Right now, we're facing social inequality. And these elections really are us fighting for our life. It really, really is. And we must take it as such, research every single candidate, and let's not assume anything. Let's not assume seniority gives us effectiveness. Let's not assume just because you're Black that you're fighting for me. Let's not assume anything. It's too important right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much.